Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Higher Education Innovation Showcase. I'm Goldie Blumenstyk, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education and co-founder of a project we call the Relearning Project, Mapping the New Education Landscape. This session fits perfectly with that initiative that we have at the Chronicle. What we have today is courtesy of Bridget Burns from the University of Innovation Alliance, who is a big believer in this notion of quick 7-minute talks of 5 to 7 minutes so people can get up there, give you a fresh idea, and help spread the idea out into the community. What we have today is speakers from five universities, actually real life human beings from actual higher education institutions, we don't have apps up here, we have human beings from real institutions. And we're going to hear today from leaders and top officials from Bentley College, Arizona State, University of Pennsylvania, University of Rochester, and Michigan State. Here's how the deal's going to work. Each person's going to come up and do their little spiel. I'm actually going to run the little 5-minute timer on my phone. So 7-minute timer on my phone. I got freaked out here from the back. It'll ring. It'll be a little bit annoying, and that'll certainly make sure everyone gets up fast. I'll probably have a question or two for each of the speakers. We'll run through this thing, and then we want to hear from you all and get your questions. And so if something comes up from one of the speakers that you want to ask, or one or two of the speakers, write your questions down while they're talking, and we'll do Q&A when we're done. So we're going to start off very quickly. We'll start with Goyal Larson. She's president of Bentley College. Gloria, take it away.
Thanks, guys. I'm thrilled to be here with you this morning. It's already started. Because it gives me a chance to talk a little bit about our secret sauce recipe for our 98% job and grad school placement rate over the last 8 years. We have a 4-part approach that we use that in the wake of the global recession, I'd like to explain a little bit because I think it makes a big difference. I'm a non-traditional president. I'm a recovering lawyer. Spent many years in law and public policy and business, and I landed at Bentley 10 years ago. And I've been absolutely thrilled to work with millennials and now their younger siblings, the Z generation, on helping them figure out what they want to do with their lives. And what I found is that I came as one of those unusual, unabashed fans of millennials, and now I'm all the more so because I believe if you give them the right job-ready skill sets along with lifelong learning capabilities, they can set the world on fire in all the right ways. So a little bit about Bentley. Bentley's has, as I just mentioned, a 98% job and grad school placement rate over the last 8 consecutive years. But our overarching mission for the past 100 years, this is our centennial, has been to create creative, socially responsible organizational leaders for what is always an evolving marketplace. It was 1917 when Harry Bentley opened a one-room school of accounting and finance in downtown Boston. He transformed bookkeeping, then just a very traditional vocation, into the sophisticated profession of accountancy, just as the financial services industry was taking off in the United States. So now, 100 years later, we look very different than that one-room school. We're a university home to over 5,000 undergrad and grad students, 2 PhD programs, 24 majors that cross business and the arts and sciences, as well as numerous advanced business degrees. I arrived at Bentley in 2007 with one halcyon perfect year, the economy humming along perfectly, until the following year when the entire world melted down. At the same time, we saw repeated national surveys that showed that employees found recent college grads completely unprepared for the workforce. Unemployment rates soared. You'll remember this. Far too many millennials were employed as baristas living in their parents' basement. We all realized that the marketplace had taken a dramatic shift, and although we weathered that economic storm well, we wanted to understand the new normal. So in 2013, we launched our own national survey, one called Prepared You, more than 3,000 employers, parents, students, and academics. The results were overwhelming. In the new normal post-recession era, we all have to provide students with job-ready skills as part of their college experience. But we found something really interesting in the data, particularly at the C-suite executive level. They acknowledge that students also have to graduate with the traditional soft skills, the things that are always underlying a liberal arts degree. Our data also confirmed the need these days to have the latest technology, always up to date, have companies in the classroom helping with curriculum, and to make internships an essential part of college and start career planning way before second semester senior year. For Bentley, Prepared You was just the impetus that we needed to expand and accelerate what we were doing. And we have what we consider a great market-aligned set of 4 key elements. So I'm going to get to the to our key elements. The centerpiece of all we do is the ever-deepening merger, we call it fusion, of business and the liberal arts. Our faculty encourage our students to analyze issues through multiple lenses in every single class, business, humanities, and social sciences. And in practice, here's what fusion translates into. Incredible options for our kids, all related kinds of things thematically. So you can have double majors that marry passions with practicality and pragmatism. For example, an accounting major who double majors in ethics and social responsibility is going to be the candidate that all four Big Four accounting firms want. Think of a sustainability science major who double majors in finance. They can take their passion for tackling climate change and actually be able to read a balance sheet for the new wind farm startup. Over the past few years, we've introduced 9 new majors that reflect these hybrid workforce needs. So no matter what course of study our students choose, we add to the centerpiece of fusion with 3 other elements: hands-on learning, technology, and career planning. Experiential learning allows our students to test drive their knowledge, if I can make my clicker work here, to test drive their knowledge. The Wall Street Journal has called internships the new first job. We think it's a practical reality. A survey of our most recent grads found 93% complete at least one internship, over 71% do at least 2. We add to that with study abroad, corporate immersion classes where companies of every size bring their problems into the classroom. As you can imagine, technology also plays an incredibly crucial role at Bentley. That's the third element, as does service, and service learning is key to what our kids do too, and there you see a group of them doing that. With respect to technology, we are constantly making our wired and wireless campus better. We have been internationally recognized for many years now for our trading room. We have more than 50 undergrad and graduate courses related to the trading room, 24 Bloomberg terminals. It allows our students to analyze real-time market data. Other resources include our Center for Marketing Technology, a media lab for young filmmakers, a user experience lab to test new websites and apps, and our sandbox, my favorite, a high-tech co-op space where next-gen game developers spend a lot of their time. Last but not least, we plan career planning for our students day one freshman year. We have 20 people in our career services office, which is more than twice for other schools our size. Most of them have MBAs. They virtually all have workplace-based experience. And 95% of our students spend all 4 years working with our career services team. They develop a personal career toolkit that includes taking Gallup Strength Finder aptitude tests their freshman year. The approach has made our kids so highly sought after that one firm recently brought a petting zoo to Bentley University to try to outdo the competition. You see them there. I think both of those students joined that firm. So the results of Prepared You have been unbelievably gratifying for us. Remember the 98% job and grad school placement rate? The class of 2016, 99% grad school and job placement rate in their own fields. It's a record that led the Princeton Review this past year to name us #1 in the country for career planning, and then a few months later, #1 for internships as well, landing us a lead spot on the Today Show. So, in a nutshell, Bentley grads are job-ready, critical thinkers eagerly recruited by every organization that you can think of. Wall Street media firms, Silicon giants, Big Four, new economy startups, bioscience and green tech companies, consulting groups, and many others of all stripes. And over the past few years, what's been equally gratifying is to find that our reputation and our rankings are finally catching up with what we do with our graduates for success. These include a top 10 B-School ranking from Bloomberg Businessweek, top 5 for return on investment for The Economist, top 30 for Forbes, Money Magazine Best Value, Wall Street Journal's first ever list of the top 100 schools of any type in the country. Our goal is global citizens, but job ready too. It's our goal to make sure that they're empowered to do both things. That's my personal passion, in case you can't tell. And I've written a book. It's out in August. It's all about Prepared You and our model, but includes other innovative schools as well. I hope you'll take a look. Thank you.
Before you sit down,
I will.
no, before you sit down, one quick question. Obviously, there's quite a lot of capital required for a lot of these things you do. I think everyone knows about internships being a really important part of this.
Finally, schools.
But how do you? But what? I mean, that's easier said than done. So what have you been doing to actually, in a sentence or two, to get the internships available to help your students fill these. They're not always that available.
Well, I hesitate to say this, but we were doing internships just like Northeastern way before the recession. So this has always been part of the Bentley model. We've now just accelerated and added to what we do, but I think any school should do this. Do you remember when, right after the recession, liberal arts colleges often found themselves kind of barricaded behind the wall saying, lifelong learning, you won't take us alive. It's all about that. Here's the deal. Every school, I went to Vassar.
Literally, how are you finding the internships?
That's how they do it. Vassar has a Rolodex now as deep as mine. Every school has the ability, look at your alumni base. Really smart schools are now reinventing career services, and they're reaching their alumni base in ways they never did before. I would certainly start there.
Great, thanks. Okay, our next, it's not really the Shark Tank, but our next, well, we're not going to vote that way, and we don't have any money to give away. Our next speaker is Sean Hobson. He's the Chief Design Officer and Chief of Staff at ASU, our hosts for the conference.
Great, so thank you, and just quickly, at a unit called EdPlus at ASU, so Chief Design Officer is a bit of a unique title for a university, and I'll get into that. But the main point of my talk is around culture change, the types of people, the types of institutions within our organizations we need to have to get dramatic change and innovate within our universities. So hold on, come on, hit play. So my university is based on access and inclusion and quality, and without sacrificing any of those three. And so if I can get my slides going, we'll go to the next. Oh, I'm supposed to be hitting the green button.
Green arrow to the right.
Okay. And so we all know that we're in a place where, we need to be really thinking about innovating. This one? Bam.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody understands this statement here. But essentially, only 36% of the people that are going to university, or only 36% of Americans have some sort of post-secondary education. And 50% of those who start don't complete. And we have about 36 million people who have some sort of post-secondary education and need to come back. The challenges we face here in the U.S. are only dwarfed by those globally. According to OECD data, we had about 160 million who needed access to higher education in 2010. That's expected to grow to 410 million by 2030. So what we have and what we're dealing with in the U.S. is only dwarfs that of global universities. And so if we were to meet this demand by traditional brick and mortar universities, we'd have to build 4 physical universities, each serving 80,000 students each, every week, every year, for the next 15 years. And so, the point being is that we are not going to meet this demand by using our traditional models and just scaling brick and mortar universities. Even with the growth of online education, which you can see here represented by the white line, we're still falling way short in terms of how we're going to meet this worldwide demand for education. And so my point being is that we need to be thinking about new models, new innovations, new public-private partnerships, and who are the people within our universities that are going to be spending their time exclusively on these things, not as a side project against many other things that they're doing. We all understand that technology is greatly expanding our ability to access education, but in reality, technology is already outpacing our ability as institutions to figure out what to do with it. This conference is a perfect example. This is a graph that's published by EduVentures every year just to show a little bit about the landscape of technology. How are we as institutions figuring out how to deal with this chaos when the one thing that everybody in this graph has in common is that they have a promise to solve a solution or a problem that we have in higher ed. And so what are those problems? And just to zoom in really quickly to something like VR, which may seem like something that's on the edge or the fringe of what we're doing now, but what does version 2, 3, 8, 10 of virtual reality technology mean to the learning experience and how our faculty teach and how our students absorb content and move forward? What are some of the burning questions that we're all facing in higher ed? Our institution are dealing with these. Every other institution is dealing with these. How do we make smart investments with technology? What is our digital education strategy? How do we partner effectively? What skills do we want the students of the future to learn? What are the units? What are the processes that we are using and taking advantage of to solve for some of these? So we're starting to see kind of R&D shops pop up across higher ed. This is just a sampling of many institutions that are having sandboxes within their universities. Some of them are decades old. When you think about the MIT Media Labs, you think about some of the things that groups like Stanford and Harvard have built, but units like the Sandbox Collaborative at Southern New Hampshire, Academic Innovation Unit at Michigan, the EdPlus unit within ASU, all have academic R&D and innovation at the core of their value proposition to the university. You're seeing these kind of sandbox spaces pop up where faculty, students, innovators, partners are all to come together and do innovative things and think differently and creatively about the models. These are safe spaces for experimentation. But it's not just the space that's going to get this done. It's the process, it's the people that we need to start attracting into higher ed to help work within these spaces to solve some of the outcomes. Design is a word that's a very popular word these days, but very misunderstood. I spend a lot of my time talking about design as beyond this notion of beauty. And so what is it? It's the act of seeing something you want to be better and then responsibly making it better. And so this is a little design squiggle that shows a lot of the work that we do, taking things from complex ideas and turning them into elegance. But in reality, real innovation is more like a heartbeat monitor. And so when you solve one thing, you just get to another really messed up squiggly line, and you got to figure out how to get it to a place where true innovation happens, where you're ratcheting and ratcheting and ratcheting. There's a lot of different types of designers. One secret innovator that many institutions might know of now, but we definitely know of at ASU, is the notion of instructional designers. They're working at the intersection of technology. They're working on teams with faculty. Quick anecdote, we brought all of our instructional designers together and asked, what is it that you do? This is the list that we got. We asked, what is it that you think faculty do? And we got tech support and computer support. And so we have a branding issue between the roles of the people that are doing innovation in higher ed and the perception of what their roles are within their institutions. And that's something we need to fix. There's new design roles emerging. This is from a report John Maeda posts every year on design and tech. And the notion of design thinking is a big part of something that's being built into business schools all over the country. But computational design as a new design function around people that are designing solutions for scale. They're programmers, but they also have design thinking built into their DNA. These are the types of people that I argue we need to be trying to think about how they can come into universities to help us solve problems. EdPlus is an entrepreneur. I still have 50 seconds here. What are you doing? So EdPlus is an entrepreneurial unit that is focused on some of these problems within ASU. Just to talk a little bit about, I've never gotten this far in a slideshow without putting up our charter, but just to show that we are really focused on access, the communities that we serve, and for us, figuring out some of these large-scale solutions for scale, inclusivity are paramount for the EdPlus organization. And just to show you, we've been on a very aggressive approach around online or digital education over the last 8 years, where we've grown organically from 4 courses, 4 programs, and about 400 students 8 years ago to the nature of 26,000 students, 140 degree programs. But what I wanted to also talk to is that there's a lot of R&D efforts that happen under the fold that help advance these things. The list is huge, but we take all of these R&D efforts. They help us with how we work with our faculty, how we work with the core of the institution, and raise the vision of the institution. So the question is, what's next? What are we as a community going to do to start to advance these people that are entering into universities or rising up through universities? They're reporting directly to our provosts, our presidents, our senior leaders at the university. How can we get them a seat at the table in the problem solving, decision making, and then the implementation of some of these ideas? Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Please.
A lot of these, the sandboxes and the skunk works, things that you've described, they're created as sort of a little bit off the side of the university. So what's the key to getting them integrated into the university? Once they're, how do they not be seen as just those jerks over there doing all the innovation stuff that the faculty and the traditional academy doesn't respect?
So for us, EdPlus is a service unit to the university. We don't have our own faculty. We are a service unit to the colleges, the deans, the departments, the faculty members, but we're also part of the senior leadership team in terms of strategy and decision making. And so I think, you got to make sure that you recognize the core intellectual capacity of the institution, which is our faculty, which is our students, and include them in the process from start to finish across all of these initiatives.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Next up, thanks, Tom. Next up is Barbara Kurshan. Many of you know her as Bobby Kurshan. She's the she's got a lot of long titles here. Executive Director for Academic Innovation and Senior Fellow in Education at the Penn Graduate School of Education. Bobby?
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about innovation, and the best story I have to start is when I told my son I was taking this job. He's a typical San Francisco entrepreneur. He was at Yelp before it went public. And he said, "Mom, education and innovation, that's a non sequitur." So I think when I came to the university, I wanted to look at innovation and how we could change what we were doing. So when the new dean came on, we have Dean Pam Grossman, she said, "I've never had a person that ran innovation. What do you do?" And I said, "Whatever you want me to do, but you have to think out of the box." So we've done a lot of things at Penn. We put together programs. We have the only Masters in Entrepreneurship and Education. Our director's sitting in the room. Jenny, raise your hand. And we have a virtual online teaching programs. We have a Center for Innovation that we're starting that I'm going to talk about. We have an incubator, and we have a large business plan competition that we run, the only graduate school of education that does that. Most ed tech business plans come out of business schools. So we did this by creating an ecosystem around education and innovation. And we decided that the problem with innovation in higher education was that they didn't realize that they weren't researchers in their own silo and that they needed to interact with all of the pieces of the ecosystem. And we started with the researchers, and we said, how do you get your research to practice, and who do you speak to? Well, the reward systems are all backwards. A faculty member does a research report, gets it published, and about 3 people read it, but they go on because they get rewarded for the amount of publication they do, not the amount of impact they have. And innovation is all about impact and scale. Most of us as researchers in the university, that's not our motivation for doing the work we do. So how do we get the researchers to interact with the investors and the governments and the financial pieces? Their interaction is basically, will you give me a grant to do my research? But innovation has to flip that and say, what can I do with the funding that you will give me to make a difference and have an impact? We work with entrepreneurs and we bring them directly into our program. We spend a lot of time thinking about who are entrepreneurs, what is an entrepreneurial mindset, and how do you create that entrepreneurial mindset. And we do that through our master's program in entrepreneurship. We do that through research and creating assessments for entrepreneurial mindsets. We do that through our educational incubator. We're the only university that truly funds and supports and have invested in companies through our incubator program out of a graduate school of education. And we finally bring together educators, parents, and students, and our student teachers in our teacher education program to work with our entrepreneurs, to work with our researchers, and to make the connections to create this innovation ecosystem. Believe me, this is not an easy job, as many of you know. When I came to the University of Pennsylvania, I did a survey of how many people at the university had the title either innovation or entrepreneurship in their title. How many people do you think at a place like the University of Pennsylvania had that title? Well, almost zero, but surprisingly, a lot of people had the title, but they weren't doing innovation. We have a large number of people working at the university. Only 90 people at a university the size of Pennsylvania had that in their title. And we do not have at the University of Pennsylvania, until 3 months ago, somebody working out of the provost's office or the president's office that had an innovation title. So what do? We build leadership for innovation in schools through our ecosystem. We have our Masters in Education and Entrepreneurship program. It's an executive style program. We the people and the students that come to our program are people that have worked. We use the same model of an MBA. We want them to have work experience before we bring them into the program. We have 3 strands, a business strand, an entrepreneurship strand, and an education strand. They come over 13 months, and their goal at the end is to build a capstone project to either write a business plan to start an ed tech business or an education business, or to build a new school and create a new school model. So we find that we do a lot of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. Several of our students are probably in the room today. If you are, raise your hand. Is anybody in the room? They didn't get up in time, did they, Jen? So we also have expanding the network for innovation in education ecosystems. We run the Milken GSE Business Plan Competition and Conference. We have over 250 applications every year, and we give away $140,000. We use that competition to have conversations about what is going on in innovation and education. They come globally, and we reward them not only with cash prizes, but with the ability to become part of our incubator. We also run the Education Design Studio, which everybody likes the word either innovation or design. I'm looking for a new word, if anybody. Or studio, right, exactly. I'm looking for a new name in the world. But anyway, our entrepreneurs go on and raise money. In the past 5 years, we've run 5 cohorts. They've raised over $18 million in funding, and we have put through 32 companies in our program. It's a 6-month program, both virtual and at our design studio lab, which is one of, as you showed, many of the gorgeous pictures. We have one of those too. And so we do like this program a lot. And now we're building a Center for Innovation at the Graduate School of Education. Now you can imagine what that does to the faculty. It makes them nervous. It makes them think, what am I going to do? What's going to happen to me? And so what we're going to do is convene people, curate and disseminate the information, create new learning opportunities and tools to put the research into action, and we're going to connect research findings with innovative practice. And we're going to do this through a dynamic, multifaceted hub that we're going to help people to use knowledge differently through our makerspace, transform knowledge from just getting it published in reports and the way we get knowledge created, and we're going to connect people and build and communicate knowledge. This is quite a change in the way we think about knowledge at universities, and it is a dramatic change in what we're going to have to look at all the institutions that deal with the way universities currently run. And it's a hub that will serve and engage all the same constituencies that we talked about: entrepreneurs, entrepreneurials, researchers, business, investors. And we have been funded to start this July 1st with a grant to do the work here. And so we're looking for people that want to innovate. We're hiring a new executive director for our Center for Innovation. If anybody's interested, come see me. And we will, and we're looking to make a difference in education. Thanks.
You mentioned a lot of these programs that are coming out of the School of Education, the master's degree, the incubator, things like that. And since you're pretty familiar with the ed tech world in general, what's different about companies or projects that come out of a School of Education versus those that come out of the rest of the ed tech environment? What's really different in that
We asked that question a lot, and we really want to know if we're creating entrepreneurs both through our entrepreneurship master's program and through our incubator. And what I think is different about the School of Education is our mission for a School of Education is to have an impact on teaching and learning. And so all of the things we look at and we give our students the skill set to explore what's happening in education, how do we reform education in new ways, and how do we apply the definition of innovation to what they're doing in the classrooms.
Do you think it has is it more educationally sound? Can you make that argument?
I think it's more educationally sound. I think the problem that entrepreneurs in education fail is for 3 reasons. One, they know nothing about the research. So they come to me and say, I'm going to build this product in blue, and all the research says it should be in red. And I say, why blue? And they said, oh, because I like it. And instead I say, well, why don't you convince me based on the research that blue may be a better idea? The second reason they fail is that they don't understand education. Most of them come out of fields. They've either been a Teach for America for 2 years, and now they know how to change the world, but they know nothing about technology, or they've spent a lot of time working in technology and made a little money in San Francisco, and now they want to work in fields that are going to change the world, but they know nothing about education. And the third reason they fail is they don't realize that it takes a long time to change education.
Great. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay, our next presenter is Jonathan Burdick. He's the Dean of College Dean of Admissions and the Vice-Provost for Enrollment Initiatives at the University of Rochester. Take it.
I'm anxious to know who my audience is. How many people in here actually also work at universities? Okay, quite a few. Terrific. Okay, so I don't know about you. This is my first opportunity to be at an educational technology conference, and I've been literally, we talked about drinking from the fire hose. I feel more like a surrogate member of the audience in listening to what they do, and I feel like I could continue to do that. Our problems at Rochester are maybe similar to what some of you in the audience are facing. Some of you in the audience who didn't raise your hand might be the answers and solutions to our problems. So I'll present to you how I think about these things, and then try to ask for the audience as a whole to be thinking about these problems, and maybe by this time next year in San Diego we'll have some new solutions. Two things have been true for the University of Rochester in the last 13 years that I've been there. Our enrollment has grown. That's an important dimension for us in terms of access and in terms of quality. Our enrollment is catching up with what is a gigantic medical center and an enormous enterprise that's of importance to the upstate New York community, and the undergraduate community has to build around that. The opportunity to grow has come at least more than 50% from abroad. So international students and their desire and need and anxiety to access U.S. higher education has been a tremendous force in what's been going on in our community, to the point where the freshman class that I just helped bring to campus, or that is on its way to campus, will now be 30% students from abroad, from 100 different countries. So this is, to me, a truth of higher education at the highest levels in the United States in general. It's a truth that actually goes back a generation in the UK and Canada and Australia. So in some ways, the United States is just catching up with this idea of being a locally global places. But it's an important dimension to consider, in that what we might solve or resolve in the United States for K-12 education is not then going to turn around and be the final and distinctive answer for what students need to have on the kinds of campuses we offer. The other question that has arisen, and I came to campus in 2003, is this question of technology. I think it was right in 2003 when one of the CEOs of one of the big 5 technology companies made a prediction, which he has since rescinded, saying that brick and mortar is going to go away. And of course, with this demand that we've seen from abroad and the growth that we've had, that doesn't seem to be the case. So the question for me has become, how do you take this experience that people seem to still value and want? At a traditional age, on a traditional kind of campus, we're 90% residential. We are offering a lot of programs and a lot of research and a lot of activity, and a lot of that is being embedded by technology in ways that have been described by my colleagues up here. But nonetheless, students still seem to value the process of being together in communities, learning and living and making that kind of approach. And unless we persuade them that they shouldn't value that we need to be doing these things better. So the issue in question that has come my way in my role is, what is inevitably going to change or likely to change on the basis of the students coming to us with these handheld devices and being digital natives in the way that they are? And one of the big questions that seems to arise that has not yet been answered, but the students are trying to find answers themselves, is they want transparency. They want clarity and assurance about what's going to happen to them. I need go no further than, and this is certainly true at Penn, and I think probably Michigan State and ASU to some extent as well, and probably Bentley, that they are mystified when it comes to understanding what it is that even is going on when they are being chosen for the opportunity to attend. So in my world, we're admitting about 20% of the students that come in, and those students do not feel like they've got clear guidelines or guideposts as to how to make progress to be eligible candidates. So my opportunity came along to turn that around and to increase transparency in the process. The first thing that we did going on 10 years ago now was to allow students to track, and this is where technology comes in. We wanted to allow the students who were checking online with us, who had engaged with us, were part of our community already as applicants, to be able to track where their application was going. So for 10 years now, students applying to the University of Rochester have been able to see whether their application is complete. That happens in a lot of places, but also who is reading my application right now. They've been able to track right along with their first reader, communicate with them if there's something that they think is valuable for them to understand, to engage with them all the way through the process, to go on to second readers, to go on to the committee, to continue to have that opportunity. It has been meaningful to our students all the way to the point where when they get their admission letter and offer, they have had some indication and some understanding and some concrete knowledge about what it is that was valued about them and what it is that we think makes them ready to come in as great contributors to our community. As a result, we think, because we're careful in admissions and we have this what I call a dance. It's not a race, but a dance, an iterative process where they can evaluate what is being valued by us in the admissions committee and then bring that to the fore. Our retention rate is now 97% of all freshmen. It's one of the highest retention rates in the country, and that has made progress as we go on to, we're at an 88.9% four-year graduation rate now. So we have moved up in a way that has been meaningful from a 79 to 89% rate, and we think that's all about cushioning expectations with students in ways that technology abets. The next step for that, and I'm in a crossroads with it because I can't actually show it, you could find it online, but we just launched a pilot program with our recently admitted students that we now plan to roll out with our prospective students, in which we are trying to turn around the process of admissions and make it a crowdsourced activity. The reason this is valuable and important is that most of you who went to college might say this. Certainly the surveys are very clear about this all the way through. Students who are, while they're in college and certainly after they graduate and for many years after, what they will describe as what was the most important and valuable part of that college experience was the other people who were there with them. And by that, they don't entirely mean the faculty and the staff, and they certainly don't mean the programs exclusively. They mean the other students in their peer set. But in admissions, we have not as yet taken advantage in any way of the technology that allows us to allow peer-to-peer analysis as part of the choice of choosing which students arrive. So we are trying to change that. And what we have launched and what we presume or hope to launch next with our 400,000 prospective students whose names we have is something called the Hive. It fits Rochester. We're the Yellow Jackets. We actually let them progress through levels of development in this Hive interactive process. But the basic premise is they take the profile of what they're using to apply for admission through the traditional means with us as an admission office, distill it into factors that they would like to highlight about themselves. Some of you have seen this on a site called College Confidential, and they're looking for chance me kinds of activities, interactivity. They are putting up their profile and then inviting other students to vote and thumbs up and in other ways indicate that they have found something valuable about the process that they're releasing. The reason I can't say much more about it right now is I'm running into a buzzsaw of parental resistance. Parents think that this is another form of pressure for students that they won't do this. I happen to think that the generation that is coming along is now actually very excited about the opportunity to share and be networked and be engaged, but is this fundamental change from what the faculty as parents and parents in our community think is likely to be valued and appreciated in the concept and what we're doing. But watch for it soon. We hope for a major launch in September with the students that are already going all the way through. And we're trying to break that very tight black box around admissions and eventually financial aid processes to make it more transparent for all the students that we're trying to serve. Thank you.
Jonathan, one quick question.
Sure.
I'm a cynical person by nature. I kind of wonder, was some of this sort of driven by a need to develop more affinity from the students once they become alumni? Is there a little bit of that behind some of this, or what's driving it?
We haven't had a problem with alumni engagement, so that wasn't the problem we were trying to solve. But
What were you trying to solve?
Certainly, well, we were literally trying to solve the problem of how do you enhance community on your campus so that the students are serving and bringing themselves along, and how do you use technology to make that happen? In my case, I'm looking at the Cradle. The alumni are also looking at places like Bentley about not the grave, but the remaining set of things that happen after they graduate and they spend 40, 50 years in the workforce. And this concept was important because community is what students refer to as graduates as what mattered to them as part of their college experience in the first place. But actively thinking about the ways technology continues to support that community from beginning to end is what was the problem driving us.
Okay, great, thanks. No, we know. We don't have a, very good. We're doing a little quick stage set here. Now I'm going to call up Kristen Renn. She's a professor of higher education, adult. I don't really know how to pronounce your title right.
Higher, adult, and lifelong education.
Higher, adult, and lifelong education at Michigan State University.
Thanks so much, Blue. So they told me in advance they'd be moving that podium, so I'm going to stand over here, take advantage of that. And they also said it wasn't because I was too short to see over it, which it was. All right, they've started my time. I'm going to talk about networked improvement and how we are at Michigan State and throughout the University Innovation Alliance. centering student success through a process called process mapping. So Michigan State University is one of 11 large public universities that have committed to increasing the number of low-income graduates over the next several years, and we are having some success through some pretty low-tech technologies as well as some pretty high-tech technologies. So I'm going to talk a bit about that today. So you see here Michigan State's graduation rates. These are 6-year graduation rates from the fall cohort that began in 2016. You see right in the dead center where we have some pretty appalling what we call opportunity gaps. Those groups in the middle are Black students, Latino and Native American students. So you see that we're between 15 and 20 points behind our overall graduation rate for some of our demographic groups. And we think that is not okay. So we've developed at Michigan State University a number of principles for our student success work on campus. One is that we focus on students, trying to keep students in the center. Another is that we are consultative and deliberative. We're designing through co-creation, not one individual's great ideas that they're going to champion and run off with into the sunset. We're trying to create cohorts of faculty and staff who know how to be leaders in student success. So that from graduate student TAs through provost, we have a whole set of a cadre of people learning how to do this work well. And then finally, we're focusing specifically on our opportunity gaps because we know that's how we are going to increase graduation rates overall and do better by the citizens of Michigan. So Michigan State University was one of the 11 members of the UIA, as I mentioned. The UIA gathered for the first time in February 2015 at Georgia State University. This is just a snapshot from my camera of a panel that was on stage. I believe that's Jeff Salingo in the center. This group of folks at Georgia State was describing a process they went through to understand more about how students made their way through Georgia State. Now, this is not Georgia State's process map. This comes from EAB. It was a community college process mapping. What you see on the top is what a group of administrators and faculty thought the student experience was like, from the time you apply through the time you kind of get enrolled in classes. What you see on the bottom is when they actually mapped through what the student experience was like, and it's hard to see in this diagram, but they have numbers of hours or days students would spend in some of these processes. So they've likened it to more like chutes and ladders than a linear kind of process, right? So you can be going along fine, and then you hit a speed bump and things go down. So Michigan State, we had 5 folks at the first University Innovation Alliance gathering at Georgia State, and that's Atlanta Airport Gate A19, where we spent a little extra time because there was some weather at home. And while we had an extra several hours in the airport in Atlanta, we decided we want to take up this same idea. We want to do some process mapping at Michigan State. And so we started thinking about what are the kind of constant roadblocks, the pain points for students in success. And we know that the communication that we send students from the time they submit their deposit, yes, I'm coming to Michigan State, through the end of their first year, we were sending them, well, we didn't know how many, but we knew we were sending everything by email. We weren't getting through to students, and we were particularly concerned about how low-income, first-generation, Black, Latinx, Native American students might experience these communications, which might be different from students from a college background or whose families could help them understand. So we brought together, and this is where we go a little low-tech. So we brought together about 50, 60 people for 2 days in April. So 2 months later, we got ourselves trained up. And these are all across campus. And we had never had in one place before admissions, the comptroller, financial aid, academic advisors, residence hall staff. We brought together a host of folks who had never literally been in the same room to talk about how we communicate with students. And again, one of our low-tech, this is where we owe a debt, well, we actually paid a lot to 3M for all those colors of sticky notes. So this is one design thinking kind of process that we used, and we just made giant calendars of the academic year. The swim lanes, which are the horizontal lines, represent different offices, and each sticky note represents one or more communications sent to students from, again, the time they deposit, and we ended up having to restrict it not even to the end of the first year. So what we found out when we analyzed this, and it took a whole summer of a whole bunch of student staff, we found out that we were sending literally hundreds of emails between deposit day and the day they arrived for fall classes. We were expecting students to negotiate dozens of different portals on campus, all with different interfaces, not even Spartan branded, God forbid. And that there were dozens of ways in that, even that short amount of time, students could end up with a hold on their account that for many students was the off-ramp from Michigan State University. Oh, you didn't pay that parking ticket? Literally, that could be your off-ramp. So we then acted, and we formed a key functions team to prioritize and find alternatives to email. Because as you see in that picture on the left, you can't tell in there whether the invitation for 3-on-3 volleyball signups is more important than, hey, you missed the FAFSA deadline. They were all coming from msu.edu email addresses to students, all of whom were reading on their phones and skipping most of them. So we could see how this was disadvantaging certain sets of our students. Now in this slide, I'm going to show you, after a year's worth of work, what we come to. That looks complicated, right? But that is actually less complicated than that one. Notice the stacked up emails there, stacks and stacks of sticky notes. We boiled it down and we prioritized to say which are the most important messages to send. How do we help students understand which are the most important? And when do we need to go back to slightly older fashioned technologies for communicating with students? So this is what we did after we prioritized across financial aid, registrar, and a couple other offices to say, because this is now a full calendar year, and each of those dots represents one email instead of the 400 we originally had. So you can see that it's a much, again, looks complicated, but it's much simpler than it used to be kind of stuff. And where you see the extensions up, those are the, if you missed a deadline, here's how we're going to find you. Right? So that would be that. Now, the UIA operates on a model of experiment, scale, and diffuse. And so this process at Michigan State, which we learned from Georgia State, again, think of those folks on the stage, we went home, gate A19. Every time I walk by it in the Atlanta airport, I smile. So at gate A19, we came up with our own process, did it. A year later, we had trained up the fellows, the UIA fellows from the different campuses, and they've gone out and they've looked at a number of processes. They picked their own process to map, so medical withdrawals, financial aid communications, transferring from community college. Here's just a couple visuals. You can see, again, this involves human beings in a room together with Sharpies and sticky notes and sometimes scissors. These are all kinds of processes that different campuses have mapped in order to simplify and make into more straight lines, less chutes and ladders, the process for our low-income, particularly students. So the diffusion of process is really what we're doing in the UIA. So we, as I said, we innovate, we diffuse, and we scale things up. That would be one, the process mapping exercise is one example, and the particular example for Michigan State of simplifying our communication to students would be one to highlight today. I'm done.
Kristen, I have a question, actually. How do you, at some point, a year from now or 2 years from now, keep all those that colorful map from getting colorful again? And also, I mean, that seems to describe university communications from email, but obviously, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's a lot of ways people can to reach out to students. Instagram, does the university kind of control the whole? You beat the thing. Does the university have a way to kind of control the messaging beyond the one level and to keep things from someone else deciding next year that doesn't really apply to me? My department still should send out its email.
By bringing all those folks from different places together in one room, one of the really important things that happened was the interpersonal sort of face-to-face saying, wait a minute, I can back down. My, again, 3-on-3 volleyball, sorry to pick on rec sports, isn't as important as that other message. So one thing was sort of little hearts and minds work on campus to convince people to let go of their own priority. We aren't attempting at a place as big as Michigan State, which is not quite as big as Arizona State, but getting there, to say like, oh, student government, we're going to try to control you. We're just trying to hone in on what are the key institutional communications that are interfering with student success and trying to get in the way of that and then have this prioritization. We'll keep a communication priorities committee going forward.
I mean, does the fact that it's aimed at, particularly aiming at helping at lower income students and underrepresented students, does that argument help make win the day some days or something?
Absolutely. At the whole bunch of, when we built this community on campus of student success faculty and staff, what we've learned is that a whole bunch of us actually were first generation students ourselves. And by giving voice to that, for people to be able to say, you're right. If I had gotten all those messages myself by email as a first-gen student, had nobody to talk, or maybe my parents are English second language, who would I have talked to? It's really, at a land-grant university like Michigan State, 40% of our students are first generation. It really has a lot of, it grips a lot of people.
Great. Okay, take a minute now. Let's thank these panel for a second, and then, no mic. Nope. Not gonna have time. I thought we go to 11. Sneaky. I apologize. There isn't going to be time for questions, but I'm going to volunteer all these people to stick around afterwards, and you can buttonhole them. How about that? I'm really going to thank the panel.